Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Allie here. Happy freaking Wednesday! I'm so excited for today's video because it's about one of my favorite subjects ever, aliens. This story today is going to be about Betty and Barney Hill, also known as the Zeta Reticuli incident and also the Hill abduction. Now the Hills are very well known in the alien and UFO community because they are kind of the very first people who ever had this huge abduction story. And I personally think this incident is super crazy and super bizarre. So I hope you guys like this new twist on WTF Wednesday, and let's just get right into it. Betty and Barney Hill were an American couple who claimed that they were abducted by aliens back in September of 1961 in a rural area of New Hampshire. Like I said, this incident kind of became known as the Hill abduction or the Zeta Reticuli incident. Their story was adapted into the best-selling book of 1966 called The Interrupted Journey, which was also made into like a UFO movie as well. According to the Hills, the incident took place on September 19th, 1961 around 10:30 p.m. The Hills were driving back from a road trip vacation that they took to Niagara Falls, and this is when Betty noticed a large bright light in the sky. How they all start. Wouldn't be a good UFO story if that wasn't the case. At this point, Betty noticed that this light was looking very bizarre. She said it was moving up and down and very sporadically, and at first she was maybe thinking that it was some kind of, shooting star or falling star, and she actually had Barney pull over to the side of the road and she grabbed a pair of binoculars to get a closer look. As Barney and Betty looked through these binoculars, they definitely thought that this craft was really odd. Being able to kind of get a closer look at it, they definitely noticed something was strange. Something to note here is that Betty's sister actually kind of had a UFO experience of her own several years prior, so Betty was definitely a lot more intrigued by what she was seeing just because of some of the stories that her sister had told her previously. The Hills continued driving, and this is when they started noticing that the craft was getting closer and closer. Something that Betty also noticed was that it was twice the size of this large kind of granite structure that was part of the mountain that was 40 feet wide. So she noticed that it was twice the size of that, which is obviously 80 feet. That's huge. And she also noticed that it looked like it had been rotating. At this point, the couple was starting to get extremely nervous. The craft was approaching, and it was approaching very rapidly. At one point, it was so close that Barney and Betty started being absolutely terrified, and he slammed on his brakes in the middle of the highway and stopped his vehicle. The silent craft now hovered only 80 feet above their 57 Chevy Bel Air, and they started freaking out. At this point, Barney grabbed his pistol and binoculars and he exited the car to try to get a closer look at this vehicle, or this craft. Barney claimed to see 8 to 11 humanoid figures peering out through the windows of this craft. All of these figures, except for one, began to move towards the back portion of the craft, while this one humanoid figure stared, looking at Barney, and even though he actually wasn't speaking to him, he knew what he was saying. It was almost like he was somehow talking to him telepathically. This humanoid seemed to say to him, "Stay where you are and keep looking." Barney had a recollection that these humanoids were wearing these silky black capes and black hats. At this point, Barney became hysterical. He grabbed Betty, jumped back in the car, and said, "They're going to capture us." And at this point, he said the craft was encircling right over their vehicle, and it basically looked like a pancake is how they described this craft looking, and it also had a bunch of red flashing lights. And at this point, Barney floors it. He is in hysterics trying to get away from this craft. At this point, as they are racing away from this UFO, they start hearing these strange, vibrating noises and beeping noises, and this seemed to be coming from the trunk of their car. This also sent some kind of tingling sensation through their bodies. I think of this almost as if there was some kind of really high frequency coming off of the craft that was such a high frequency that it was kind of giving them almost that sensation when your like arm falls asleep or your foot falls asleep. Finally now, the couple returns home and they start noticing some really strange things going on that they didn't remember happening. One of these things was Barney's binoculars. The strap on the binoculars had been torn, even though he didn't remember any kind of like altercation or him breaking or dropping the binoculars at all. They literally used them just to look up at the craft with, and that was it, and the strap was just fine. Another really interesting thing is that their watches weren't working, the clocks in their house weren't working, and not only were their watches not working, but I've read that they never worked ever again. Like they had completely stopped working. Barney said his dress shoes were also like extremely scuffed up and scraped up, and he also had some kind of weird sensation telling him to check his genitals, which he did, and he found nothing out of the ordinary. The couple then took very long showers trying to rinse off any type of contamination that they maybe could have got, and then they each sat down and drew a picture of what they saw. They were worried that they were going to forget or that like their minds would be erased. They also at this point were already experiencing a lot of memory loss. Not like memory loss as like who they were or anything like that, but memories from what had just happened. They were already kind of like not really even sure how they got home, kind of things like that. And so they decided like, let's hurry right now. Let's talk about everything that happened and let's draw pictures. Let's write it all down before it's like no longer, you know, erased in our memory basically. After trying to get some rest that night, Betty woke up in the middle of the night and for some reason she just felt the need to go and move the clothes that she had been wearing. So she went, grabbed her shoes and grabbed her dress and moved them from the back door to her closet. And it was at this point that she noticed the zipper on her dress was broken, the hem was ripped, and there was some pink powder on her shoes and on her dress as well. I also wanted to mention later on, kind of in this investigation that I'm going to get into, it was also found a ton of radiation on her dress, so I wanted to note that. I always find it so crazy when I read these like weird unsolved mysteries that like for some reason radiation is like involved. If you saw my Day Outlaw Past video, you know that video also had to do with random radiation found, so I always think that's really bizarre. Here is where shit gets even weirder. And this is the next day when the couple wakes up, they go out to their car and find that there's like gold circles like embedded in their trunk. And they're everywhere. They're just gold circles all over their trunk. And remember, as they were speeding away and they were kind of hearing those weird frequency noises, they felt like those noises were kind of coming from the trunk as well. When Betty and Barney decided to look closer at these circles, they brought a compass over to them and noticed that the closer they moved the compass towards these circles, the faster the needle of the compass would just spin rapidly. On September 21st, Betty called the Pease Air Force Base to basically tell them about what had happened. Major Paul W. Henderson decided to give the couple a call for a more like in-depth and thorough interview. At this time, he decided that their story was inconclusive and that they had misidentified the planet Jupiter. Within a day of the encounter, Betty checked out a couple of books from the local library about UFO encounters, and I don't want to say she kind of started becoming obsessed, but she definitely was trying to research and find out any information she could about what had happened to them. In one of the books that Betty had checked out, she discovered NICAP, which if you don't know what NICAP is, it is basically like a community UFO research group. She wrote them a letter and basically told them about her encounter and said, can you help me? You know, nobody's really giving us any help. I'm afraid people are gonna think we're crazy. So she wrote this letter to them hoping that, okay, they're UFO researchers. They're gonna be able to help us and explain something about what happened. This is when Boston astronomer and NICAP member Walter Webb was basically assigned their case, and he gave them a call and said, let's meet up. I wanna talk to you guys about this. Webb met with the Hills on October 21st, 1961, and they had a 6-hour interview where Barney basically said he was trying to give him any recollection he could about what had happened, but for some reason he said he could tell there was some kind of mental block that was basically blocking him from remembering like very specific things that had happened. 10 days after the encounter, Betty started having very extremely vivid dreams and nightmares about the abduction. What's interesting about these dreams is that they seem to have stopped abruptly after 5 nights. So she had these insane, vivid dreams 5 nights and then they were gone. In November of that year, Betty started writing down everything that was going on in these dreams of hers. In one of these dreams, Betty said that they were forced to stop their car by like a road blockade, and then these 3 small men started making Betty, like walking her into a pitch black forest. She said the men stood about 4 to 5 feet tall and were wearing dark blue uniforms and hats, and she said they kind of looked like some kind of army cadets. She said they also looked very human-like, but were very obviously not human at all. She said they had dark eyes, dark hair, bluish lips, and their skin was a light gray color. She also noted that Barney was walking behind her through this forest, but he kind of seemed to be in like some kind of sleepwalking trance. She said once they boarded the craft, it was a like pancake looking silver craft. They walked up into the ramp, and once they were inside, these humanoid figures separated Barney and Betty. Betty then dreamed that she was taken into an examination room with the leader. We don't really know what that means or how she knew he was the leader. That's just what she has said from her dream. During this examination, she was seated onto a chair and a bright light was shown in her face. At this point, the leader cut off a lock of her hair, examined her eyes, teeth, body, nose. She said some kind of other humanoid came in who seemed to kind of be an assistant, and he used like a little razor blade knife to kind of scrape off some like pieces of her skin, her fingernails, her toenails. And then she said this is when they began to test her nervous system by shoving a large needle into her belly button. Betty said that this was extremely agonizing and she started screaming in pain. And it was at this point that the leader rose his hand like over her eyes, and suddenly the pain was gone. Once this assistant examiner left the room, Betty said she was left in there alone with the leader. At this point, while she was alone with the leader, she grabbed a book that was on a table to her side with all of these weird ancient looking symbols and writing. She said that the leader said that she could go ahead and keep the book. However, she said that the examiner assistant guy walked back in right as the leader was telling her this, and he seemed to tell the leader, no, we can't have her remembering any of this. She can't take the book with her. And they took it away from her and said, sorry, you can't have this anymore. On November 25th, 1961, they were being interviewed again by Dr. Webb and some other NICAP members. And this is when the subject of hypnosis got brought up. This NICAP member's name was Dr. Simon, and he began hypnosis that January on both Barney and Betty. During these hypnosis sessions, they were asked to basically describe what these figures looked like, and Barney and Betty both described the figures very, very similarly. And at this point, UFO researchers and just kind of ancient alien theorists had decided that what Barney and Betty were seeing were in fact gray aliens, which is kind of this alien species that are very well known. I feel like, a lot of encounters that people have been said to have, they're short in stature with gray skin. They're kind of just known as the Greys or gray aliens. At this time, while under hypnosis, Barney continues to describe what's going on and kind of what happened to him when he was taken on this craft. He said once he was on the craft, 3 men or aliens escorted him into an exam room where he was told to lay flat on his stomach on an examination table, and they told him that he will want to keep his eyes closed for most of the examination, which is freaking terrifying. Barney said that a cup-like device was placed over his genitals and a sperm sample was taken. Something that I think is really interesting is that both Barney and Betty were communicating with these aliens this whole time, but they said they didn't ever recollect their mouths moving at all. So what's so strange is they said there was probably some form of telepathy happening, which I think is really interesting. Barney says he was relieved from the craft and was sent back to the car. And he said this is where things get a little bit dizzy. This is when we kind of go back to the first story of their first recollection of what happened, he says at this point, this is when they get back into the car and he starts getting frantic, and this is when he speeds away and starts hearing the high frequency beeping and noises coming from the trunk. It's important to note that after these sessions took place, Dr. Simons kind of had his own idea, right, and his own speculation after performing all of these interviews and hypnosis on Betty and Barney. This is kind of what he decided. First off, he basically began saying that Betty's encounter that she was dreaming about could have stemmed from all of the books and all of the resources that she was looking into at the time. I definitely could see why this would be plausible, because I don't know if this has happened to you guys before, but I definitely know if I'm like reading a book, or like, let's say, okay, for example, if you guys have ever seen Lost, I was obsessed with Lost. Dan and I watched it every single night. Like, we'd watch like 4 episodes a night for like 2.5 hours. And I was dreaming about Lost all the time. And I actually got put under for a surgery I had. And when I woke up from the surgery, I thought that I was in like an examination room from the show Lost. So I definitely could see, you know, something like very bizarre and traumatizing happening to Betty, and she's doing all this research, she's reading all these books, and I could definitely see how, you know, maybe these dreams could have maybe been exaggerated or kind of conjured up due to all of this. And it's important for me to note this because that's kind of what Dr. Simon thought happened, and he also thought that Barney's stories could also have been something that, you know, he kind of conjured up in his mind based on Betty's dreams. Simon also just kind of thought, he definitely believed that something had happened, that they had seen this craft and that they possibly could have been abducted, you know, due to the strange circles on the car, the radiation on their clothes, you know, their clocks not working, all of those things he definitely thought were bizarre and unexplained. However, he kind of thought that all of this research and dreams and like everything that was happening was a little bit fantasized and exaggerated to the Hills because they were just searching for answers. And to him, it was like they wanted to know what happened so badly that like this whole situation kind of started coming about, if that makes sense. Now, of course, Betty and Barney disagreed. They said, no, we know this happened. And it was kind of, I guess, a good thing because both Dr. Simon and the Hills said, okay, great, we did this hypnosis. We know what happened to us now. We're good. We're golden. We feel good about it. And I guess in a way the Hills kind of got what they wanted out of it, and they did felt like that gave them some closure. They felt like we're not crazy. He hypnotized us. We know what happened. We're good. So just as kind of quickly and abruptly as all of this stuff started, it also began to very quickly trickle down. Obviously, the Hills were getting a lot of publicity. They were in the papers. There was a lot going on because, again, this was kind of the first time anybody had came forward and like publicly said like that they had been abducted and that there was this UFO sighting, you know, and all of this stuff. Things slowly started turning back to normal. Like I said, a book was written, a movie was created, and the Hills still very much like stayed in the UFO and alien community. You know, they went to different lectures, they did lots of interviews, they were still, you know, they still never gave up on the fact that they knew this happened to them, and they don't know if it'll ever happen again. They haven't had anything happen since that we know of. No strange dreams. They haven't been visited by anybody since then. But like I said, you know, their lives just kind of began returning back to normal as they could be in the circumstance. And yeah, they are just kind of forever known in the alien community as kind of this first public abduction. Oh, I almost forgot a super important part. So one of the reasons why their story is known as the Zeta Reticuli incident is because at one point during one of these dreams, I literally can't believe I almost forgot to say this because this is like a huge aspect of this story. Betty wrote down like a map of the Zeta Reticuli. And if you don't know what that is, if you're not a crazy alien nerd like I am, the Zeta Reticuli is basically the kind of universe or planet that the gray aliens are supposedly from. I'm sure Betty did not know what the Zeta Reticuli was, or what gray aliens were, or anything about, you know, astronomy at all at this point. So what she had done was said that she had dreamed about this planet basically, and when she drew it out and when she kind of mapped it out, there were several astronomers again kind of in this UFO community who were like, damn, she literally drew Zeta Reticuli. However, on the flip side, there were a lot of people, you know, all saying, well, she's been doing her research, she's been reading books, she's been doing all of this, and again, this was a dream that she had had. So it also could kind of tie back to the theory of she was having all of these dreams and like all of her thoughts were being consumed by all these books and research she was doing. So a lot of people think that she was dreaming about the Zeta Reticuli after like reading about it and things like that. So kind of interesting. All right, you guys, once again, just like all of my videos, I obviously, you know, have left out a lot of detail. This story is really, really crazy. You can definitely read. I'll leave links below. I also listen to an amazing podcast, of course, because I'm obsessed. And I'll leave that link below as well so that you guys can kind of do your own research and look into this. Want to know in the comments below, do you believe they were abducted? Tell me what you think. You know, to me, yes, am I like a total alien nerd? Yes, but I also like to see like pretty intensive like evidence, and to me this case just doesn't really have a whole lot of evidence, especially with Dr. Simon saying himself like, yes, I think something happened. Yes, I think they saw some kind of craft, blah, blah, blah. But do I think they were probed and examined and taken onto this ship? Maybe, maybe not. So what do you guys think? Also, please like this video if you want to see some more kind of alien type of shit. And of course, as always, please subscribe before you leave. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.